Warning, I'm as about Asian as a fortune cookie. So be careful, I will mispronounce things.
Long ago, the four nations lived together in harmony.
Okay, you know what? Maybe not really. I mean, to be honest, it was mostly just these two that fought it out. And these two just mostly watched. Maybe they fought her too, but I'm not sure. But anyways, ancient civilization. Containing Greece, Rome, Egypt, and China. Well, and Mesopotamia, but no one cares about that. What we're here to talk about is the previous four. Is there truly one that is the best? Are they all equal? Meh. However, since I have to choose a side, I'm choosing China because I don't know. So let's start at the beginning. No, not that early. A little bit too far. Close but wrong empire. There we go. China was inhabited as early as 10,000 BC, which is like older than Madonna. But yeah, anyways, people started forming around the Yellow and this river, and all was fine and dandy, and then corn plants. Around 4000 BC was when people started making silk. From then on, silk became a highly popular fabric, because it was a nice looking functional fabric. And because of this, the method to making silk was kept secret to only the people who had specialized in making silk. It wasn't until 552 AD that the secret to making silk got out. It literally was like 4 millennia and a half of secrecy, when two monks from the Byzantine Empire smuggled silkworms from out of the empire, revealing that silk was made out of the cocoons of silkworms. So what you do is take your silkworm and then unravel it, and then you spin it in a spinner with like other silkworms, and then you get silk. The first dynasty started around 1650 BC, the Shang dynasty as it was called. During the Shang dynasty, city walls were built, bronze was being used constantly, and the first traces of a written language were found, which you know is kind of like good for communication. The Shang dynasty lasted for over 600 years, and was led by 30 different emperors. Later on in 481 BC, the 7 city-states of China, the Chu, Han, Shin, Wei, Zhao, Yan, QI, went to war with each other to get land and stuff, fighting for over 200 years, with like no one winning at like anywhere at any point, until the year of 220 BC would be the beginning of the new empire's control for the entire country. This guy had gotten together his army and his handy-dandy crossbow, and eventually took control of the entire empire, in under 20 years mind you. From this came a lot of changes in the entire empire. Well, obviously the crossbow, carriages being the exact same size to fit all the roads, the country being united into one, and a lot of burnt books. Also, this dude was like buried with a lot of dead people too. In 201 BC, the people of China found a rock that, when set down and shaped like a spoon, will point into one direction only. Shut up. This mineral is now known as lotus stone, or lodestone, or you know, whatever. And this was the beginning of the first compass. Before the compass, people identified north from the North Star. And while the system did work, there were faults with cloudy skies and daytime. So in this way, the compass made us more efficient at traveling and exploring. While, this guy was still alive, there were like a bunch of nomads attacking. So this guy just said, yo, let's make a giant wall to protect us from these guys. So they did. After 12 years, and thousands of men leaving their homes and dying in labor, the Great Wall of China was finally done. And was like 4,000 miles long, and up to 30 feet tall. So it was a pretty big wall. And then the Huns attacked. And then the Tang dynasty happened. And with it came paper money. Paper money was like a big change. Oh, but anyways. It was easier to produce, it was easier to count, it was quicker to use, and it was easily portable. You can check if it's fake or not. And also it looks really cool. But it's clear that modern life would also be extremely different. While not the creator of paper money, Kai Lun was the creator of paper. Well, at least in China. And it was made from the pulp of bamboo trees. Which is another bucket of worms I decided not to cover, whatever. In the year 740 AD, the first mechanical clock was invented. Okay, while it doesn't really look like a clock, per se, it still did its job. In fact, modern clocks are based off of this. Okay, maybe like the last half-century's clocks, but you know what? It was a big deal when it came out. Looks like a tower with like watermill or something. Maybe like a torture device. Invented by, these guys. It was water-powered, and every rotation of the wheel was a full 24 hours. And there was also a bell that rang every hour. In 1912, was the point when the empire finally came to an end. Seriously, this empire lasted for like 10 millennia. So you know what happened was in 1912 they decided, yo, this dynasty thing isn't working. Also, there were some European countries that were like, yo, you look pretty tasty. So stuff happened, conflict happened, things in the dynasty weren't working out. And then bam! The new guy, new president, buddy old pal, took over, and that was the end of the empire. Bam! And they all lived happily ever after, until pollution happened. And now for my moment of truth. I must collect all pieces of Exodia, conquer Narnia, and save Christmas. Why do I think China is the best empire? I don't. Let's start with the inventions. The inventions were a stable part in China. They were the most technologically advanced empire, at least for their time. Their inventions are still being used today or have been adapted into something else that we use. They also had a lot of impact. Can you imagine life without the compass? Can you imagine a world without paper money? Or silk? How about clocks? Can you? Feel the love tonight. Anyways, these are just a few inventions that China has created that have impacted our lives. They are the fastest to unite into one single empire. Some empires, they even go into one giant kingdom or whatever. But this quick unification allowed China to focus more on their inventions and progression, rather than fighting for land or whatever. And after this, China never really got any problems with itself, other than the times between dynasties where we had like no one to rule it, and like natural disasters and peasant uprising. You know what? You get it. China literally lasted 10 millennia. I mean, that's a long time. And any empire that lasts for that long is doing something right. It didn't even end by anyone taking over it. At least not by another country. Oh, and sure, it didn't really fight many battles. It didn't really be very aggressive. It didn't get that much land. But you know what? Rome had a lot of land, and look how that turned out. China wasn't great because it had a lot of power. China was the best because it had a lot of rich culture, a lot of creativity, and basically thought of every invention by itself. It had completely different gods, it had completely different rulers, it had completely different morals. It had different types of governments, and it had different kinds of laws. And yeah, they were different, but they worked. So is China really the best empire? Honestly, it depends on your opinion. Every empire is flawed in its own way. Every empire has its own strengths and weaknesses. There's always gonna be that messed up ruler. There's always gonna be that dark age. By my honest opinion, Greece is a pretty good empire. Egypt has some pretty cool chill lipstick. China is the best empire. There we go.